introduce the founder and editor of 21stcenturywire.com. So Patrick has been on, he's featured on many programs, RT, Al Jazeera, InfoWars, Coast to Coast AM, Guerrilla Media Network. Today he's going to identify how the media manipulates reality, which we know it does, obviously. And he's going to give us tools to identify exactly what they're doing, how they're doing it. And I'm sure that most of us are very self-aware and very knowledgeable in this, but obviously Patrick is an expert on this. So we know that mainstream or lamestream media is losing its grip on controlling the flow of information we receive. So for a number of years, corporations and governments have been spoon-feeding us a version of reality by manufacturing the consensus they want to hear. So Patrick manages to put current events into context, and he demystifies complex systems in a way which helps you to understand the global chessboard. So let's welcome patrichennegsen.
Good afternoon, everybody. I've got a remote control here. Okay. Right. Thank you for coming, and thank you very much, Ian R. Crane, for organizing this event, and all the great speakers. I've got a presentation today that I'm going to give. I'm not preaching to the choir today because you're all very open-minded, although if I was giving this presentation 10 years ago, this would be a very different audience, knowing what we know and what we've all experienced and seen with our own eyes and what we know to be true or to be reality, or at least our version of reality. This is a good time right now. We're in a different phase of the information age. This is like phase 2. Okay, very different than maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, or 2 years ago. So the hold on. Bending reality. Ian said, have you got a title for this talk? And I just off the top of my head, I just thought bending reality, because that's what mainstream media, corporations, politicians spend billions of your dollars and pounds and euros doing, which is contorting reality. Now, a lot of you know this, but the big problem that you have, and I know because I have this problem, which is explaining this to people maybe who don't see it. So I'm going to show you some tools and a few case studies and show you how I do my work. And hopefully you can take some of these specifics and use them, because you have to fight this battle every day with family members, with friends, with colleagues, with people you meet in a pub. It's endless. This is what I was doing for the last 20 years before I got into actually writing and talking myself and putting my name on things. I was doing that. I was trying to figure it out. I was reading a lot. I was doing a lot of arguing. I was getting, having to walk out of family dinners at Christmas, So if someone brought up the subject of 9/11 one Christmas, and that was really ended badly. But I'm happy to say that, I've come through the other end of that, at least with people, because I really don't, I'm not wanting to convince anybody of anything anymore, because I've developed my own platform to put the ideas out, and they say, what do you think? People always are trying to goad you into a trap. So what do you think about 9/11? What do you think about this? And they want to get you to speak so they can start putting the conspiracy theory finger at you. And I don't even answer them anymore. I say, if you want to know my views, just go to my website. That's what I spend 8 hours a day doing it for. So go do some reading. So bending reality, countering media manipulation in the 21st century. This is, we're going to do a little mental gymnastics just to get you warmed up, because we're going down a very deep rabbit hole right now. Different levels of the rabbit hole. So a lot of you might think, and this is exactly what we are doing most of the time when we're interfacing with the corporate media or with government newspeak, like this cat, which is walking on the wall, and somehow there's something not right about this picture, but we're so used to seeing it. This has become the norm in terms of mainstream information. And if you've seen that movie Inception, that's kind of, we've become so adept at navigating this environment now. And most of you have. That's why you're here. You're here to learn more, but you understand this, that sometimes the room is turned upside down, and you still have to keep going through it. You still have to keep your balance in this. It's not easy, and that's why a lot of people are fearful of trying to look at things a slightly different way, because it's uncomfortable. And this is exactly what's happening here. This is a shot from the film The Matrix. And it literally, you're having your reality contorted right in front of your very eyes. And it happens from the minute you wake up till the minute you go to bed, if you're engaging in this sort of stuff. But now let's just define this. I'm going to set some ground rules here. There's an old term called the fourth estate. Has anybody heard that term before? Raise your hand. You're familiar with that? What the fourth estate used to be the name for the press. Okay? So Gutenberg invented movable type. We had mass publications, distribution of information. More people got the ability to read. King James Bible came out, and the rest is history. And then somehow this press, can we go enlarge that for a minute? How do I do that? Okay. So the fourth estate was seen as essential, a part of society, a successful society, along with the church, along with the family, equal to the government, commerce. That was necessary to have a society thrive in modern times. That was accepted as self-evident for a long time, until recently. And so the fourth estate is, I just want to put that term out, because that was a term that was widely used years ago, and not many people use it now. And I think we need to revisit that, and that's a real cornerstone of this talk today. There's a difference between press and media, okay? Press does reporting. That's traditional journalism. But there's this new thing that's come out. They've managed to replace the word press with media. And media can be anything, okay? And media has become heavily politicized. There is a media outlet for every single notch on the left-right paradigm or the liberal-conservative paradigm, through the libertarian. And a lot of it's funded not through traditional means that the press would have been newspapers, independent television, broadcast networks, and so forth, by advertising. It's done by foundations, political action committees, private individuals. And it has the veneer of press, but it's not press. Not at all. And that's a big problem. And we also have state-controlled media, which we'll talk about. So it's heavily politicized. So if we lose the free press, there's no way to name and shame those engaged in, let's say, criminal behavior, those who are corrupt, those who have a blatant conflict of interest. There's no forum. That's it. You're left to basically spray painting walls and writing things on the inside of toilets. That's it. And that's why it's very, very important we understand and the difference between those two things, and why we need to bring back the principles behind press, reporting, facts, which is being done a lot online now and less in mainstream newspapers and broadcast networks. So any level of tyranny is possible when you lose the fourth estate. There's no limits. And history is a good guide there. You just have to look at a few case studies there. So and here's the point I'm going to bang home in a minute. We've never actually had a free press really until the internet age came along. This is the first time in human history that we've actually had a free press. And it's definitely under attack. So I'm going to read you a quote. This is, there is no such thing at this date of the world's history in America as an independent press. You know it and I know it. There is not one of you who dares to write your honest opinions. And if you did, you know beforehand that it will never appear in print. I am paid weekly to keep my opinions out of the paper I am connected with. Others of you are paid similar salaries for similar things, and any of you who would like to be so foolish as to write honest opinions would be out on the streets looking for another job. If I allowed my honest opinions to appear in one issue of my paper, before 24 hours, my occupation would be gone. The business of journalists is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of Mammon, and to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. You know it and I know it. And what a folly it is toasting the independent press. We are all tools and vassals for rich men behind the scenes. We are jumping jacks. They pull the strings. We dance. Our talents, our possibilities, our lives are the property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes. Okay? Guess who said that? And guess how long ago he said it? John Swinton, New York Press Club Address, 1880. Okay, so the things that we're dealing with now, the angst that we have, the problem we have with this media manipulation is not new. It's been going on for a long time. So in 2014, trivial stories routinely grab headlines. Product placements grab headlines. Statin cures dementia. How many times have you seen that on the front of the Daily Express? Or statin this or statin. Those are paid for front page placements by the companies that manufacture those drugs. Cock-ups, not cover-ups. How many times have we heard this? We'll show you a few examples. Oh, it was just a cock-up. There's no cover-up. Someone made a mistake. Information becomes disinformation. Informative is replaced by coercion. That's NLP. Fourth estate has become a fifth column. It's working against society and the people. What used to be the fourth estate is now working against you. So they have a monopoly on reality. They have a monopoly on information. They manufacture a consensus on a number of issues. They have a monopoly on consensus. And they create what's called consensus reality. That's a very important term. So the BBC in this country will be the guardians, let's say, of consensus reality. That means that's what the majority of the people think about any given issue. So therefore, that must be reality. And there's no plurality of opinion in that conversation. And you'll be pushed into the fringe, left to fight from the corner over there, and seen and told to be and characterized as irrelevant. That's what we're absolutely dealing with. So most people now view the world in terms of a narrow band of reality. Most people on a number of issues. And that's not such a good thing. So, they also, what does this mean? The danger of this is that somebody, or a very small group of people who control this system, have a monopoly on history. And if you're living your life through life and your history is not your history, or it's fake, or it's manipulated, then what kind of a society are we moving forward? What kind of an individual life can we really have? So, the media's fascist, I'll only use the F word once in this presentation, the media's fascist tendencies. The press has never been really free. It is heavily subsidized, in many cases, by the government, bought and paid for by the people I mentioned before. Perceived legal risks and phantom costs. This is what we're told governs self-censorship in the mainstream media. Official Secrets Act. So if you are bound to the Official Secrets Act, you can't talk about anything. D-notices. A lot of people aren't aware. There's an Air Force commander sitting behind a phone somewhere in a desk, and every morning all the papers have to phone him to find out what today's list of D-notices are. And those are things that you can't talk about, cannot mention, cannot report on. Technically, I'm supposed to call that Major General, but I don't, because I don't have the number. Libel laws. This also creates a chilling effect. So, and the Leveson inquiry, which was basically, as has been pointed out by Brian in other presentations, that was designed to accelerate the demise of an already compromised free press. Okay, so this is, in effect, state and corporate control of what we get every day. UK broadcast media, they have a daily news agenda. And that's not a theoretical floating thing. I'll show you it's actually real. And I'll show you where they get that agenda, all the networks. The BBC versus News International. We'll talk about that relationship. Collusion between state and media, controlling the news agenda, state-sponsored global terror. These are all characteristics of UK broadcast media. In America, it's a little bit more Wild West. It's very partisan. So the networks are attached to certain causes or certain political parts of the spectrum. CNN, Ted Turner's agreement, his deal is whoever's in power, he will support and defend the White House, whether that's a Republican or a Democrat, generally speaking. Okay? Fox News, strictly Republican Party, strictly. MSNBC, aligned with the Democratic Party. Many White House staffers either have shows on that network or they are employed by that network, including former Press Secretary Gibbs, David Axelrod, and a number of others. So USA Broadcast Media is actually the military-industrial complex. No exaggeration there, owned and operated. So this is your point of view, courtesy of the military media complex. So in the 1990s, this is when this really started taking shape. In the 1990s, a watershed moment happened. The total number of controlling firms in the media, including newspapers, magazines, radio, television, books, movies, went from 50 corporations in 1984 to 26 in 1987, 23 in 1990, and to less than 10 in 1996. Today it's about 6. Okay? You see how it's been compressed. So that's called consolidation. Effectively, you have a cartel right now. So those 10 at the time were News Corporation, that's Rupert Murdoch's empire, Sony, Time Warner, Disney, Viacom, General Electric, Telecommunications, Inc., Seagram's, Westinghouse, and Gannett News. So, according to Project Censored, in 2010, only 118 people comprised the membership of the boards of directors of the 10 biggest media giants. 118 people. Okay? Now, so let's look at who those people are. William Kennard, New York Times, is also a member of the Carlyle Group. That's George Bush Sr.'s corporate confab with the Saudi Arabians and everybody else. Maybe, I don't know if, definitely John Major is, I believe, on the board of the Carlyle Group. They're military, heavily. So that's New York Times. So Douglas Warner III, GE, General Electric, major U.S. defense contractor, owns NBC. So Bechtel, and Bechtel as well. He's on the board of Bechtel. So John Bryson, Disney, owns ABC in America, and he's on the board of Boeing. And Alwyn Lewis, Disney, ABC, is on the board of Halliburton. And Douglas McCorkindale from Gannett News is also on the board of Lockheed Martin. So that's why the wars get promoted so enthusiastically from the word go. There's a massive conflict of interest there. That's a problem. So some of those companies, these are the 50 corporations that basically own many other corporations below them. So these will be the top 50 in the West, not including Chinese corporations, which are actually much bigger in terms of capitalization than Western corporations now, say the top 3 Chinese companies. So you have the Carlyle Group and General Electric, but who are the major shareholders in those companies? Are banks. And these are who they are. So we're just setting the parameters here. So here's the tools of the trade. Right now, the dominating tool of the trade is political correctness. Neurolinguistic programming, NLP. Intellectual cul-de-sacs. We're going to go into that. Cultural Marxism is obviously connected with 1 and 2. That should be 4, actually. And all these create a chilling on free speech. The result of that is no one to challenge the state. So this is how it's designed. And 1 through 4, each of those things in the end empower the state. So this is a mainstream journalist here, Simon Heffrey, says, this, in theory, is still a free country, but our political correct censorious times are such that many of us tremble, us in the media, to give or vent perfectly acceptable views for fear of condemnation. Freedom of speech is therefore imperiled. Big questions go unabated. The great lies become accepted unequivocally as great truths. Daily Mail, mainstream. So there are people who have said this, and it has kind of come out a little bit. So, NLP. If you're not familiar with here's one of the masters. President Obama is an example of a politician, but this is how they use NLP in the media. So here's one. It was a cock-up. It wasn't a cover-up. The David Kelly investigation, for instance. The state obsession with secrecy. I've seen the intelligence. I've seen the intelligence. How many times have we heard this? I've seen it. It's been shown to me by, I get intelligence briefings every morning, so I've seen it. I've seen the dossier. It must be true. Intellectual hegemony. So we're going to take a look inside the editor's head, and those are conspiracy theories and myths. That is actually a politically correct bit of NLP that's designed to stop the conversation. This is a device, the word conspiracy theory. It's a device. It's a little smart bomb. You throw in a conversation and everything comes to a halt. So intellectual cul-de-sacs, this is really important. This is how they play. This is how they're hurting you. So let's look at the intellectual cul-de-sac people. The French cul-de-sac means bottom of the bag, which I found was interesting. In English, it means a dead end, not a throughway. But I actually like the French definition there. So yeah, that's our adaptation, no through road. And here's some of the guys that know how to do this. really well. In other words, they'll lead you into a subject or an argument, and once you're in, you go in a roundabout, and there's really no way out. So here's a nice intellectual close. This is UK broadcast media. So we have, you enter the cul-de-sac, everything looks great. You've got Channel 4 here first, that's the first house, ITV, and then you come around to Sky there on the corner, who's very close to the BBC. And then you have the BBC, and they kind of dominate most of the second half of the cul-de-sac. So you kind of get gummed up there with the BBC, end up going around circles. That is an intellectual cul-de-sac, and the mainstream media itself is designed that way. Okay? Very different from what's online. Very different from the alternative media or the internet. So let's take a close look at what's going on at the BBC. Can you guys see that house? Can everyone see that? This one. Can we get a zoom in on that house? Let's see what's going on. There we go. This is what's happening. So you've got government. You've got a lot of coverage of the royal family. I mean, it's wall to wall now. It's absolutely incredible. And then you've got Jimmy Savile there, who pops up there behind Broadcasting House. That's more or less, that's the difference. You know, it's mainly the influence of these three types of individuals, or you've got a lot of that going on. And then you've got something going on in the driveway here. I can't really see it, so we're going to have to take a closer look, see what's going on the driveway. Well, there's the kids. There's the kids. Common Purpose are heavily involved with the BBC. Behind the scenes, of course. So it's all great. Let's work together. We're all a team. Keep it a secret. Yes, Levison, we can do it. That's, in a nutshell, I know it's a kind of a cartoon, but that's kind of what we're looking at there. That makes it different than, say, a press outlet. Very different. There's a lot more going on behind the doors at the BBC than they care to admit. And we'll show you a few things. So, which stories matter? Mainstream institutions are fragmented, losing their advertising, and insecure about their business model. This has led, in my view, to a profound lack of confidence, and consequently, too many news programs are chasing the same stories with the same agenda, almost in the same order, very often. Now, that's not someone from the alternative media saying that. That's been admitted by Alex Thompson, chief correspondent of Channel 4. That's not me or someone from the lunatic fringe admitting that. That's him. So, a news agenda legitimated by guess what? And this is not an exaggeration. It is the Today program. Okay, how many still watch the Today program? Not many in here. I stopped watching it in 1999. So, there's no doubt that across all newspapers, radio, and television, there's a sort of consensus that we follow. My first news hit of the day is the Today program at 6 a.m. And today was New Zealand, followed by Libya. And I'm not surprised if that isn't the same order for us for the rest of the day. Nice and easy. So, not because they set out, it is set out like that, it's because there's a sort of obvious logic, if you like. Who said that? That's a senior TV editor who wanted to remain anonymous for that book, which is called Power Beyond Scrutiny, which was published in 2012. So, and I think that would probably be someone at ITV or Channel 4. Head of news, probably. So, intellectual hegemony. A lot of this stuff, the conclusions that they come to on major events are based on the editor's gut feeling. That was my gut feeling. He made the call. That was my gut feeling. So, the appeal to a lack of evidence for David Kelly's murder is perhaps an understandable response to those whose gut instincts was to favor the official verdict. My question is, what about my gut instinct? What about your gut instinct? Does that matter at all? Because clearly, there's an institutional, habitual bias going on here that removes us, removes the public completely from this story. So this puts journalists on the same grounds as so-called conspiracy theorists. What's your opinion on 9/11? Well, it's my gut feeling that I'm being told a lie, and the official version put forward by the government is just a load of crap, basically. That's my gut feeling. You're a conspiracy theorist. Well, they're not standing on much stronger ground than the so-called conspiracy theorists that they're railing against. In fact, they are standing on the exact same ground. And the biggest purveyor today of conspiracy theories are mainstream media, journalists, and politicians. The worst conspiracy theories I've ever heard. And the most amount of speculation. I'll give you so many examples for that. Flight MH370 or 77 or 9/11. That is the official version is the most outrageous conspiracy theory I've ever heard. Okay? So you need to basically understand how the tools that they're using, and it's very easy to spin the table around. And then you need to put those who are pushing that sort of stuff on the defensive, because they have to defend their point as well. They'll say to you, "Why, can you prove it?" No, it's not my job to prove it. Can you prove that the official version is factual? So, let me go back there. So the editor's gut feeling is based on official sources. So I wonder who those sources are. And of course, the mercenaries are drafted in, intellectual gatekeepers for hire, respected journalists and voices. Let's look at a few of those. Here's weapons of mass distraction. We've got some of the top gatekeepers here. There's many of them. I'm just going to introduce a couple here. David Aronovich. Well, I first discovered that guy right before the Iraq War. He was writing for The Observer, and he was convinced that there were weapons of mass destruction there. Even if they couldn't find them, they must be there, because how could the Prime Minister be making it up? How could they be lying? And why would the Americans lie? It's a conspiracy theory. There's definitely WMDs there, and we need to go to war lickety-split quick. And he spent the good part of every issue in the run-up to that war pumping that war, pumping a conspiracy theory. And guess what? He weighed in on the Jimmy Savile scandal. A lot of people miss that, and you would miss it because the Times has a firewall on their online newspaper. If you don't subscribe, you won't see it. If you bought the paper, you would. I bought the paper that day, luckily. So this is what David Aronovich said on an LBC interview, that it's a witch hunt with Jimmy Savile. That some of the allegations against Savile may not be true, and it's might not be true. It's a witch hunt. Oh, this was at the beginning, early on. Okay, so I think that's a very shockingly sympathetic stance regarding what many knew for years, including police, was the country's most prolific child abuser, arguably. So it's a bit of NLP. And when the Newsnight thing, do you remember the Newsnight? Steve Mesham, the McAlpine scandal. Well, David also weighed in on that at the same time, and with a bit of NLP. He says, "I'm deeply skeptical about child abuse victim Steve Mesham's testimony." Okay? And this is why. The unattractive, because it's complicating. Truth is that sometimes people do lie about being abused. Sometimes it's for money. Sometimes for attention. Sometimes because that's what they infer their listeners want to hear. Or fantasy has become solidified as fact. The dream is daylight. What beautiful prose. What a literary master. I'm so impressed. Only I'm not. Because clearly this is an exercise in gatekeeping. Okay, and they are good at it. There's special people for special jobs on special subjects, and they just appear out of nowhere to weigh in on these issues, and always defending the establishment. David Mellor, don't make fun of him. So David Mellor came out in support immediately of his pal, Lord McAlpine, to help discredit Steve Mesham by labeling the abuse victim as a, quote, weirdo. David Mellor, a pillar of the establishment, no less. So David Aronovich, now, did you see that during Bilderberg, Andrew Neil had Aronovich on with Alex Jones? Okay. Now, I'm not slating Alex Jones here, but I'm just going to bring this point up because had Alex Jones done his homework on live TV, he could have pulled down David's pants and put him in the middle of traffic. Just on the WMD thing, or the Savile thing, or the BBC and the Savile thing, on live television. And Andrew Neil would have been panicking. Commercial. We don't do commercials. Oh, shit. So my point is here that alternative media need to be, when you get an opportunity to be on the BBC, if you have to be on the ball. And if you've seen Ken O'Keefe, who is an activist, Palestinian American, who's a champion of the Palestinian cause, when he was on the BBC, I saw him on Hard Talk like 10 years ago, and he just ripped that guy to shreds. And you could see they're just waiting for the segment to end. They wanted to get him out of the building. It was embarrassing because Ken did his homework. He knew exactly what he was up against, and he wasn't just there for his own, to get his own thing across or whatever. He was there because he wanted to expose the BBC as being completely hypocritical regarding the Israeli-Palestine issue, and I think he was successful. I wish Alex had done his homework or had someone briefing him before he went on stage, because that would have been monumentous. Instead, it ended up slightly different. So, the thrill of official sources. Those very journalists who do have some sort of access and privilege are so jealous and guard it so closely that it's almost worthless. They are in the pocket of the person who's providing them with what information they get. And that is the whole of the mainstream media who have access to intelligence briefings or DOD. I've got a contact at the DOD, and we had lunch, and he told me this. And they don't say what they tell them to steer away from. Oh, we don't want to go there. That's the dead end. Here's the real story. Iranian nukes. We've got the documents, and we've seen it. Here, I'll show you a little peek. Quick. And then, and then, of course, that pretty much does the job with most journalists and broadcast editors. How are you going to question the DOD or the MI5? So, pretty worthless official sources. Pretty worthless. And a lot of the deception and confusion comes right out of that little department there. So, known truths. There's this thing in media that we don't know about, but if you work in media, you have heard this. It's a known truth. Kind of like the Donald Rumsfeld semantic line there. So, BAE Systems, massive bribery scandal. David Kelly's murder, London 7/7. There's known truths about all these things. So Alex Thompson, Channel 4, says, there are endless examples one could give of well-known truths which do not make it into the public domain. Well-known truths. In other words, we all know this. Yes, we know we know David Kelly was murdered. It's a known truth, but we can't prove it. Or maybe we don't want to prove it. But we all agree that, and that sort of makes us feel better at the end of the day, that it's a known truth. So they've created a little term there that makes everybody happy and means that you're not in the wrong for not digging deeper or not challenging the establishment. That's because it's a known truth. So, And they may well be known to be true, but not provable. That sort of psychology and mindset is pervasive in the mainstream media. That's why they can't do their job. They've hamstrung themselves for various reasons. So David Kelly, well, what do we know about the David Kelly case? Well, the forensic investigation was shut down. The Hutton inquiry, I guess most of it's sealed. They've sealed the post-mortem for 70 years. Interesting. The inquiry and the inquest gave us a sense of closure, which is what inquests and inquiries generally are there for. But we have faith in the process, because the process was seen to exhaust itself. And yes, there are known truths, but the process took place, and so that is next story. Is that really justice? Is it justice for him, for his family, for you, for society, considering what he was working on? I don't think so. So you've got you've got a risk-averse media. By the way, Ian, where's Ian? Oh, he didn't put high-vis tape on the edge of the stage. That's a health and safety risk. I want to see, could we do a risk assessment? 20-page, just for that. So we've got this kind of psychology, but what drives it in the media? We definitely have a more of a yes man culture or yes woman culture now. There's a generation of people who are now very keen to rise, will do what they think the editorial bosses want them to do, and are less awkward in terms of how they interpret directives from the top. You end up with an output that is too homogenized, too reactive, and I think probably not questioning it enough. Who said that? Well, it was a senior BBC news editor. He's handcuffed. So, legal threats and other kind of excuses. Philip Knightley, award-winning investigative journalist. The British system of libel is vicious and favors the wealthy over the ordinary. That's quite a strong statement. So, speaking of libel, you probably remember this case. Somehow, some way, ITV managed to award a payout to this man for names that nobody actually saw on a piece of paper. That was quite extraordinary, £137,000. And likewise with the BBC. The BBC didn't leak Lord McAlpine's name. It came up on Twitter by who? I don't know. Michael Crick? I don't know who. Yeah, isn't that interesting? Because does she work for the BBC? So why would they have to do a payout? That was... The end result is he managed to garner £500,000 and walked away from it. Gave it to charity, admittedly. But it was just a huge farce. And that's all based on this threat of libel. So that really drives people. So Alan Rusbridger, editor of The Guardian, in my estimation, a nice man, very smart, incredibly well educated, and he does know his job. Okay? But with the NSA Snowden thing, GCHQ shows up at the door at The Guardian offices in London and says, we want the hard drives, we want to destroy them now. And they said, or we're going to sue you. So this is the government saying, we're going to sue The Guardian. And okay, and that's going to be an expensive lawsuit, and if you lose, it's going to absolutely hurt your business. And then what does he do? And mind you, I have a lot of respect for this guy. He is a good editor for the most part, but this wasn't about editorial decisions. This was a precedent that was set where he allowed the government agents, operatives, to come in, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, they made people from The Guardian destroy the hard drives in front of them. Yeah? What's that? Yeah, but that's not the point. Of course the data's been copied. Of course it's out there. But a legal precedent was set, or a precedent of intimidation or coercion between the state and the press. And I don't know about you, but if the Guardian, with that story in their hand, took the government to task and said, sue us, how big do you think the legal fund they could raise from crowdfunding? And I mean, we're talking globally, 30 million within a month. And they would already have more money to burn on the legal side than the government. And they would win. And they have public opinion behind them. I didn't see any problem there. So there's something else going on there. But again, dangerous precedent. Come in, destroy your source, give us your sources, give us the evidence, we're going to smash it to pieces. And especially something in such public interest as the NSA Snowden leaks. It's in everyone's interest. So Alan knows best, apparently. Maybe, I don't think actually, to be fair, Alan didn't make that decision. Probably somebody above his head in the organization made that decision. But it's kind of a sad event. So the irony of phone hacking in Leveson, a lot of talk's been about Leveson, designed to regulate the press, destroy the free press. But here's the irony. The entire exercise is implying somehow that we don't already have law enforcement, police, detectives, inadequate justice system. Some of you might find that debatable, but we do fundamentally have some justice structure there to deal with phone hacking. And what else have we got? The rule of law. Well, yes, we do have the rule of law, we're told anyway. And rules for confidential sources allowed. Those rules exist, as do stringent libel laws, which I've shown you are already in place. So what is the point or the need of a Leveson inquiry? Unless it's a bigger stitch-up involving perhaps the very person who looked like they were the victims of that particular inquiry, namely Rupert Murdoch's news organization. So, Ofcom. Let's talk about the bias police. This is the regulator, the broadcast regulator. So, equal coverage, equal time. In America, they call it equal time. Here, they call it balanced coverage. Balance. So, Ofcom's job is to make sure that everyone's playing by the broadcasting code and not breaking any rules. But what they don't really talk about, which I'll show you, is you have source bias. We just gave you an example of that with the intelligence sources, my sources. Source bias, institutional bias, certainly the BBC with the amount of government involvement and also, the threat of pulling their broadcasting license or making TV license people not pay. These are always create an institutional bias all the way around. Internal politics, government bias, pro-government bias. Is there such a thing? Well, we're being told now that doesn't exist. And even in fact, which I'll show you, that anybody that is going against the government has a bias. So that's a big flip from what the press used to be to where we are today. So, but Ofcom, they don't really talk much about lying nor misrepresenting facts and photos, and putting forward staged productions and passing them off as documentary news. These are all things that we've seen major networks do in the last year. But they're still on the air, and I doubt they've paid any fines. Here's one. There's a Panorama documentary on August 26th. This was the day they voted on the Syria intervention. It was called Saving Syria's Children. Now, I could do a whole presentation on this one program, and it is pretty amazing piece of work by Panorama. But I'll just show you some of the pictures. This was the zombie apocalypse. So you have, when the camera rolled, you could see, it's almost if someone said action, and then these people suddenly came to life and started moving. It was incredible. And the whole thing had these kind of very interesting scenes in them. And yes, and people have complained and they've said, no, nothing untoward there, nothing wrong there. That was a production in the professional mourners, which in the old days used to hire professional mourners to come to your funeral. if you didn't have any relatives left or friends. So these are kind of like actors. It's what it appears to me and to others as well. But, you know, the BBC weren't the only ones trying to hype up a war with Syria. Everybody was at it. And that B there, the color scheme, might give you an indication of who is steering the BBC regarding foreign policy issues. So everybody was at it. CNN, Fox were at it. These are all the children who were found to be alive after they were supposedly dead from chemical weapons. And there's a huge, huge amount of evidence by other people online. You can go see, again, a whole presentation just on this particular case. So who's driving it? Well, they seem to have no problem with the veracity of any of these things. In fact, politicians are now citing YouTube as they're calling it crowdsourced evidence. John Kerry, Secretary of State of a very powerful nation, has his best card in the deck is YouTube. And I think, wow, what a distance we've come. So, and you know, there's more of these chemical attacks and, you know, I don't know, it's funny. So anyway, Guardians come out using the Ofcom tool against RT. This is, I believe, Steve Bloomfield. So Ofcom should be looking at Putin's channel again. This cropped up, obviously, after, in the last couple of months, because everything's anti-Russian now. All of a sudden, Russia were our best friends, and now they're our worst enemies. So this is what The Guardian is saying here. Steve Bloomfield, according, for example, to Rory Souchet, RT's main news anchor, and other news channels are controlled by financiers and corporations. It is all, he told me, part of a military-industrial complex. How preposterous Rory Souchet from RT could say such things. Well, I've just shown you earlier in this presentation that that's absolutely true. Absolutely 100%. Irrefutable. Fact. No theory. And I didn't even show you everything. Because if I wanted to dig deeper into that, I could probably find it a lot uglier. Okay, so this is again Mr. Bloomfield from The Guardian, and this is why he says Ofcom should go after RT. Spoken on air of many unanswered questions about 9/11 and how Israel uses Hitler's methods against the Palestinians. Well, I'll tell you for a fact that 4 million Palestinians are not going to argue with that particular point, and I believe their opinion is valid in that argument. But of course, a lot of the media don't want to address that side of things. And of course, there are questions about 9/11. Everybody has questions about 9/11. Anybody who's sane has questions about 9/11. So that's our man, and this is what he rounds it out with, which I find quite interesting. He says, but propaganda for an autocratic government and conspiracy theories linked to anti-Semitism are not an alternative anybody should be comfortable with, nor, for that matter, is it something that the television regulator Ofcom should ignore. So what he's saying basically is there's no plurality of opinion. If you're not doing what the BBC are doing, or ITV, or anyone else, then you should be shut down. So pulling back the plurality of opinion and doing it aggressively, I might add. So what is RT all about? So these are the media monopoly breakers, okay, for broadcast media. 1998 on the internet, the Drudge Report made a huge splash, broke the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky blowjob scandal, and Matt Drudge became a household name overnight. His site is still one of the biggest sites on the internet. And that changed the playing field drastically. So, how do I get the slide up again? Okay. Al Jazeera arrived on the scene around 2001. Initially had a lot more independence than they do now. Now they're more or less controlled by the U.S. State Department. But they did break the monopoly at the beginning, and as you know, their facilities in Baghdad were bombed during the Iraq War and so forth. And I think after that, Al Jazeera did a little bit of a 180 and became the network they are now. Press TV came on 2004. They are off all satellites in Europe and officially off the air in America right now. They only exist in Arab countries, Asia, and on the internet. Ofcom took them off based on some ridiculous, in fact, Ofcom can't give one answer as to why they pulled their license. There's two answers they've given. So, Press TV, Iranian, arguably, so definitely they are biased towards Iran, absolutely, but they did a lot of good reporting on other subjects. RT, 2005. So, basically, people around the world, especially China, who has launched CCTV, which is a global English-language news network with a huge reach, okay? And RT, go back. It's a soft power trend. Russia, China, they realize we have to communicate to an English-speaking audience because we have to protect our interests, or in this new globalized world, they wanted a little chunk of the media monopoly to get different views across, okay? Because there are certain things that the Russian government or the Chinese government believe in that we don't believe in, or vice versa, okay? One of them, I'll give you a perfect example. Russia is not very, very keen on GMOs, genetically modified crops. They're not really keen on it. So they run a lot of stories about Monsanto. I've not seen one story about Monsanto painted in a negative light by any mainstream media, especially broadcast media in the UK or the US. It's almost off the list. So is RT doing a service there? I think so. But the accusations are that they're biased and they're propaganda mouthpiece of Putin. And this is interesting because I've done about, I can't count, but in the last 3 years, maybe 60 or 70 slots on RT. I have never once been censored, never once been told off, never once been told what to say, never, ever. Okay? And even now, I don't even ask them to send me questions before the interview. I say, I don't want to see them. Just tell me the questions on air and I'll answer them. Because I just don't want to get into scripting my replies too much. But anyway, so they've got Americans and British on there, and that's giving them credibility, and it's an evil plan by Putin. Well, guess what? When I go on to RT, that network, I'm not there speaking for Vladimir Putin. I'm patrichennegsen giving my opinion on that issue. And if I'm reaching 50 million people doing that, I don't see a problem with that myself. And they don't see a problem with that, so I don't see a problem anywhere, quite frankly. And I think every single other person on that network pretty much operates on the same vein. Do they criticize the Russian government enough? Probably not. But does the BBC do any real criticism of the British government? Do any of the U.S. networks really take Washington to task? No, they don't. In fact, they do one worse. They gloss over what is clearly a neo-colonial, neo-imperial agenda, and they gloss it and repackage it into something else, into freedom and democracy promotion and all sorts of other good stuff. That, to me, is worse than not criticizing the government enough, is plastering over what is clearly, a rancid agenda. So you probably saw this RT anchor. She grabbed the headlines at the right time, right as the Kiev was falling into the hands of a military coup. She resigns on air from RT. Liz Waugh is her name. She's American, RT America. She gave a very passionate speech on air, said, I will not be party to being a mouthpiece for Vladimir Putin, and it's just horrendous what the Russians have done in Crimea. They've invaded Crimea. No mention, of course, that Russia has had a Black Sea Naval Fleet base there since Catherine the Great, 250 years ago, and they have permanently stationed there something like 20,000 odd, 25,000 troops. So they didn't actually invade. They were there already. So again, that's just part of the Ukraine spin. So, who is Liz Waugh? Well, it was quite interesting. Only a few days it took to find out what really happened here. And can I see the bottom of that, please? No, yeah. Liz Waugh, this was organized behind the scenes for months by the Foreign Policy Initiative think tank in Washington, D.C. They used to be called the Project for a New American Century. And it's run by Robert Kagan, an arch neoconservative. Remember, Obama's in the White House, but look who is dictating U.S. foreign policy still. That's interesting. And who Robert Kagan's wife happens to be Victoria Nuland. There she is, or there she would like to be, on top of a tank, rolling into Donetsk. So, again, an arch neoconservative and all the rest of those wonderful people in tow. So, why are they so upset with Russia? Look, we have a situation now in the world where many people speak English, and many people have media platforms in English, and somehow the Russians have become quite savvy in counterspin. So, this article pissed off a lot of people when this came out. U.S. pullout on missile defense talks won't impact Russia. So, basically, they're calling their bluff there. And they're saying that it's a smokescreen. So Russia has now become so sophisticated that they're countering Western spin with spin back. And that just because we've had an absolute monopoly on this, especially America, for the better part of since the Second World War. And it's now broken. And a lot of people do not know what to do. So, what's happening in the Ukraine? I could do a whole presentation on the Ukraine right now, but I won't. But essentially, this tells the story. You've got neo-fascists, neo-Nazis, you've got smug presidents, buffoons in the foreign secretary positions. I couldn't find a picture of William Hague except that one, which was taken in Tel Aviv. And you've got, of course, the mentally unstable John McCain, and who's the poster child for term limits in office. But basically, this madhouse is a complete madhouse. It's 100% lies. Everything. It's the most egregious amount of lying and mischaracterizations and just making stuff up and not even answering direct questions on leaked phone calls, on sniper shooters that were shooting police that we find out weren't protesters, actually, but somebody else. And that started this whole ball rolling. But it's a whole subject on itself. I could tell you a lot of things I've learned in the last 2 weeks, but essentially it's a complete steamrolling of that country, and it's designed to hamstring Russia on a global level, but also to increase NATO's arc around the southern tip of Russia. And also there's the energy side, there's the fracking, there's the natural gas markets. So they're quite blatant about it. They're not making not hiding anything. So war on whistleblowing, here's a problem in the media. This is a real problem today. So we've got attacks on publishers. You know, we've got WikiLeaks who've attacked Julian Assange. Okay, I'm not Julian Assange's biggest fan, but I will say that WikiLeaks is not a whistleblower, it's just a publishing outlet. So they should be able to publish whatever they want and let the people decide whether it's good information or not. So the fact that Julian Assange is banged up, well, that's not a good precedent. So who knows? There's probably a lot of theories going on about that. So Singapore-style Leveson license to blog. Did you know in Singapore, if you want to blog, or you want access to their market, you have to pay a license. That's a test run. Okay, small country, but still, that's kind of where we're going with the net neutrality conversation and so forth. So do not look at any evidence, sorry, yeah, there we go. Do not look at any evidence other than what has been released through proper channels. Okay, that's what we're being told. That's what whistleblowers are being told. Go to the police, not the press. Okay. well, what if the police are known to be corrupt regarding certain very touchy issues? What do you do then? Is it going to get mothballed? Is it, so, and these are really fundamental questions. And these aren't new questions. And again, we have laws on the books already. We have a justice system. We have precedents. We do not need to reinvent this wheel again. They want to reinvent the wheel. And we know why. Because too many things are getting exposed too quickly. So this was interesting. Associated Press got raided by the Department of Justice in America. So the sweeping subpoenas at AP's phone records. Okay? And their justification was that AP was holding information that could put the American people at risk. Okay? What exactly was that all about? That was an important precedent. There's John Brennan, forced to admit under oath that, it was about a Yemeni bomb cell. Oh, what information did AP have that was so valuable? AP didn't know what they had. They had names and they had phone conversations and interviews that tied. It turns out the bomber was actually an informant. This great bomb plot that was foiled. It was actually an informant cooperating with the intelligence services friendly to the U.S. The trigger man, the guy with his finger on the button, was an informant. That's why they raided AP, to cover up their mess. Here's a whistleblower you probably haven't heard about, because this is more or less blackballed in the media. General James Cartwright, Marine, 5-star general, Marines. He blew the whistle on Stuxnet. Why did he get sentenced and indicted? Well, because he went to the New York Times. He went to the New York Times and commented on it 2 years after the story already broke, because he had intimate knowledge about it because he worked on the program. What was that? That was a computer virus designed to disable and disrupt the Iranian civilian nuclear power program, risked a Fukushima event happening in Iran, done by joint U.S. and Israeli intelligence. And also, we find out, of course, a year later, that they were doing the same target on Russian civilian nuclear power program plants. Do you think that's a bit dangerous? Do you think that's a bit reckless? Is that a bit risky? And he did the right thing. So there's a man of conscience, and he got absolutely thrown in jail and indicted, his career ruined, absolutely shamed by the political establishment for doing the right thing. And shame on the press for not making a big deal about it. In our little way, we tried, and we did, get the issue out to our readers, but where is the mainstream media on that story? Because I can't think of a more patriotic Marine general than General James Cartwright, because he had concerns about what was going on and that it could happen again. So, let me just check the time here. What? 5 minutes. Okay, we're going to have to sail through quickly, but Boston bombing, I was going to kind of just go through that a little bit. You guys are probably familiar with this, but I was following this real time with other alternative media journalists, and it was interesting. And if you're not familiar with it, there's your bombers. There's the backpacks, same backpack. Okay. So basically the FBI came out after this and said, we need your help. We need to crowdsource photos. Please send us everything you got. They got sent way more than they expected. And this was very embarrassing. You have the interesting looking police officers there with the sunglasses. Probably actors. And there's a lot of funny people on site, actually. So, yes. Different color jackets, hats, red hats, blockers, green clothing, cleaners, yellow hats, stage managers, blue hats, FBI, maybe, black clothing, craft, military contractors, high-vis jackets, police, yeah, I think. Anyway, this was my favorite picture from the Boston bombing. This is the Incredible Hulk. Somehow the clothes get ripped, but there's no cuts on the body. And I've got so many of these photographs, and everyone's seen them. And there's not a question or a peep about this. This was some sort of a drill, who knows. But I don't have the resources to rip it open, but certain people do, and they haven't. And there's a number of these events. So there's the brothers. Do not look at anyone else on the internet, says the FBI. These are our two prime suspects. Turns out the one there with the sunglasses was an FBI informant. That's funny. Anyway, but these are the guys they were chasing before they announced those two guys, Sunil Tripathi and Mike Mulugeta. How do I know this? We were listening to the police scanners while they were going neighborhood, house to house, neighborhood to neighborhood. These two guys. One of them was apprehended, possibly the other was shot. And here's this poor guy, Sunil Tripathi, was actually on a missing persons list 2 months before, which was interesting. And then, sadly, after the Boston bombings was all wrapped up, he was found dead, floating face down in a pond in Providence, Rhode Island. But he was front and center in the hot pursuit of the Boston bombers, and they just wiped these guys from reality. They didn't exist after the Tsarnaev brothers were up there on the screen. I have a lot of questions about this. A lot. So, and that's the end result there. Caught the bombers. Big celebration. So, and of course, there's your police out looking for a couple of kids, they say. And that's what you get in America. So, and then I got sent this video that the morning after they had caught Tamerlan Tsarnaev. I don't know if I have time to show this to you, but anyway, it's a video
custody here in Watertown
of the police had someone handcuffed naked. They're walking him to the police car, and it looked like Tamerlan, but he was supposed to have been shot and run over by his brother before. So we'll just move on. That's the CNN video. That's Tamerlan. There's a photo of Tamerlan. It's the same guy. Okay? It's the same guy. You can go look at the video for yourself on YouTube. Same guy. So he was in police custody, but somehow he ended up in the morgue the next day. This is a horrible picture, but I'm going to show it to you because this made a big impression on me. He was butchered after being in police custody. That's what it looks like to me. Okay? But no paper, no broadcast news network would dare ever talk about any of this for some strange reason. It's to be called pro-Islamic or not patriotic. Media blackouts. There's a raid at the Bundy Ranch, and it aside from maybe Fox, early days, CNN sent someone there to make it look bad, no other coverage. This was our photographer who snuck behind the government lines and gave the public a glimpse of how well equipped the Forestry Service was. Okay? And that there is a sniper pointed at Shannon, the photographer. They had a beat on him. Okay? So he put himself at huge risk. He is totally independent, went there on his own steam for GMN, and allowed me to use his photos to tell that story. And that is alternative media. Okay? Very, very brave and very good guy, Shannon Bushman. So, just quickly, Hollywood, that's Hollywood, folks. It's an absolute dump. And let's just talk about their little contribution quickly. Zero Dark 30, The Hunt for Bin Laden. Okay, what is the difference between the director, she got an Oscar, Catherine Bigelow, and Leni Riefenstahl? Absolutely nothing. Okay, they're both doing government propaganda right there in your face. So here's the online media. That's left liberal, roughly, right conservative, libertarian in the middle, and these are aggregators. So these are websites that have links to other sites, and these ones produce mostly original content. Okay, that there represents a lot of traffic on the internet in terms of news. But believe it or not, that is only probably 25% in weight of the alternative media. There's another 75%. Okay? Look at the difference between this, and I don't care if you want to go on the left or the right, or you're with George Soros here, or you're over there with the neocons, or you're in the middle, or you're down there with Rents, aggregating news, and activist posts. It doesn't matter. The point is, look how much choice you have compared to the other monolithic system. It's, to me, this is a complete playground for anyone who's curious, who wants to know anything about anything. I think it's fantastic. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So if they want to move us off the reservation or onto something else, I'm not too excited about it. There's a number of stories here that I got to work on in depth, and sometimes on the ground, sometimes interviewing people involved, and I learned a lot. But one thing that I discovered about all these stories was totally different than the stuff that I'm reading in the main narrative. Boko Haram, we could talk a little bit more about that, but there's the First Lady, Bring Back Our Girls. That started a Twitter phenomenon of people doing other hashtags. And this is the next phase, is they're now trying to make certain causes trendy in terms of military intervention, get the kids involved. Of course, other people are getting involved in this hashtagging as well. That's my hashtag, let them eat cake, hashtag. And this is the problem. This is the Twitter revolution. You know, before the revolution, after the revolution. They got us into a bigger cage, basically. I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter. You know, I think it's, I don't know. I don't put a lot of weight on it because it's only 164 characters, but apparently Stephen Fry loves it. So what's new is old, and what's old is novel. I'm going to round this out. You know, the security of all in the free press, the force of public opinion cannot be resisted when permitted freely to be expressed. The agitation it produces must be submitted to. It is necessary to keep the waters pure, says Thomas Jefferson. Boy, we could use him today. The basis of our governments being the opinion of the people, the very first object should be to keep that right. And were it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I would not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. But I should mean that every man should receive these papers and be capable of reading them. There's no censorship involved in that statement. Let the people decide. Okay, free means free. We have to reclaim this conversation. Free does not mean free but not free over here, or free but just change this. No, free is free. Okay? This is Walter Lippmann. The theory of a free press is not that the truth will be presented completely or perfectly in any one instance. I can agree with that. Okay? But that the truth will emerge from a free discussion. That's the secret. I am not perfect. I can't cover every issue. You're going to disagree with me on a number of things. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The point is that we have a free discussion. We will decide amongst ourselves what we think is going on and what to do about it. When you take away the free press, you lose that. And there's a lot of people that would like to take that away. So, Arthur Sulzberger, freedom of the press, or to be more precise, the benefit of freedom of the press belongs to everyone, to the citizen as well as the publisher. Everyone. The crux is not the publisher's freedom to print. It is rather the citizen's right to know. And this argument is being segregated right now. You know, it's either all about the publisher and regulating them. No mention what about our right to know. We've been taken out of the equation somehow through the sorcery of political newspeak. A free press is not a privilege, but an organic necessity in a great society. Not a big society, A great society. Do you want to live in a big society or a great society? David Cameron wants us to live in a big society. I don't want to live in a big society. I want to live in a great society. And this is what you need to have a great society. And we need to get back to that mode of thinking. Okay? Free press. Typewriter. What that represents. What it used to represent. And we need to preserve our plurality of opinion. I should have the right to put these cartoons up on my website and not get absolutely lambasted for it, which I do sometimes. So Obama's saying the U.S. has a very special relationship with Germany. And Angela Merkel's thinking to herself, he would have given the Führer a run for his money. Is there anything wrong with that? It's a bit of comedy. The comedy is the last thing that we've got. That's the last line of defense, folks. We're not losing that, no matter what. So, let's, World Wide Web, net neutrality, you got to get involved in that. Together, we can preserve net neutrality. We can keep our freedoms of expression. We can have a free press. Yes, we absolutely can do it. Absolutely. In fact, we're doing it. They're absolutely scared. Backpedaling, trying to put obstacles in our way. We are absolutely doing it. And the fact that you're all here today is also evidence to that. Conspiracy without the theory. It's time to redo the language now. I've had enough of the conspiracy theory thing. I've had enough of it. There are conspiracies, but I'm not doing theories anymore. I don't need to. There's plenty of facts out there. Okay? Just throw that back at anybody that throws that stupid NLP one your way. And I've got a radio show. I don't know if you guys know about it, but I'm really having a great time rediscovering what the radio is. Now my favorite form of medium. And it's called the Sunday Wire. It's on Sundays from 5 till 8. And I have to thank, there's a guy in America, his name's Pete Santilli, who encouraged me to do this and produced the program for me, made it easy for me on his own time, and I can't thank him enough for believing that we could do it. And we started off with 150 listeners, and now we got about 30,000. And that's in 8 months. When I started, we weren't speaking, I didn't know if 3 people were listening. It was just me and the thing. But you have to start somewhere. And we'll talk, if you want to talk about that Monday morning, I can help you with your blog or anything just to get you off on the right foot. And okay, well anyway, my website's 21st Century Wire, and also just understand that when I started it, I used free software, WordPress. I had no money. I had enough to buy the domain name. Everything else was free. And I've been doing it for almost 5 years, 4.5 years. I started off, I was so happy when I got 100 hits in a day. I was, wow, I can't wait to 200. And in a month, getting 1,000 was a big, at the beginning, and then getting 10,000. And in February, we had 1.25 million unique page views. So that's with no money. It's the last year. I've plowed, my brother and my friends have put some money in to get it going, but I started off doing it with nothing. So if you can do it with no money, you're just dedicated, and you have some belief in what you're doing, nothing can stop you. And encourage anybody else who has a blog, who has a website on anything, should be very much encouraged. Okay? We need as many opinions, as many websites as possible. As many. We need thousands and thousands and thousands. And with that, the weight of that will bury the cartel. Will absolutely bury it. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, you want to talk Monday morning, we'll do a workshop on media. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I recommend everybody go to 21stcenturywire.com. Someone did ask me before whether we could have a Q&A with the speakers. You can have your own personal Q&A with the speakers. You can accost them when they're having tea and coffee. You can ask them your own personal questions. We'd rather do that. We'd rather give them the platform here to do their presentations, and then you can ask them whatever you want. So yes, I agree with Patrick. There are lots of actors and stooges in the mainstream media. Question Time is a brilliant example. Billed as an open forum, yet they control everyone who comes in and vet all the questions. Another thing is News for You. Well, they'll mock openly and make fun of of suspicious deaths, like Dr. David Kelly, yet they won't investigate it properly. And Lord McAlpine, finally, well, he was written about in David Icke's book, yet Sally Berg